Jana to come and address us from the human rights point of view. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Let me extend to you our revolutionary greeting. Amandla. Louder, Amandla. Power to the people. His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, Honorable Chairpersons, distinguished guests, members of the press, delegates and compatriots. I again repeat, revolutionary greetings to you all. Amandla. It is a single honor and an unsurpassed privilege to commemorate, to celebrate, and to commiserate this Human Rights Day in the presence of our President and in the presence of all of you. The tragic events of Sharpeville massacre continue to haunt us. This day, many years ago, 69 people died and 180 were wounded. The police opened fire on a peaceful crowd who had gathered to protest against the racial and oppressive laws of the past system. This day marks an affirmation to ordinary South Africans, rising in unison to demand the recognition of our human rights. This year's observance also marks 25 years since the birth of our constitutional democracy. This is certainly an occasion to celebrate, and to celebrate proudly, Amandla. As we celebrate, we must, of course, reflect on the state of human rights in our country. Although much progress has been made, and undoubtedly so, we have failed to adequately address the levels of inequality and poverty. And it is a shame that today we record a small, rich community in our society, and the vast majority of people, our people, still live in abject poverty. We record that large proportion of economically active people in the labor market are still not from the white communities, not from black communities, but from the white communities. Those employed in decision-making levels are still not reflective of the gender, racial, and disability demographics of our country. 25 years after democracy, we are at the height of gender-based violence against women and children. And our justice system often responds with secondary victimization. 25 years into our democracy, black people of this country still do not have equitable access to land. As you know, that when white settlers arrived in South Africa, the first thing they took away from us was our land. And this plunged our communities and our society into abject poverty. We are still living under group areas established by the apartheid government. We still have the markers of group areas to be seen in Cape Town, in Langa, in Nyanga, in Chatsworth, in Durban, and in other parts of the country. We have recently witnessed a surge of ugly instances of racism, racial discrimination, and hate speech, with extremely high levels of xenophobia and discrimination. What happened to the promises that our previous leaders made, that Africa belongs to all Africans, and we should open our doors and welcome Africans from our continent who come into our country, and also to try and earn a living. 25 years into our democracy, we see institutionalized or systems of corruption continue to weaken accountability structures. The poorest and most marginalized segments of society suffer the consequences disproportionately. The poorer are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer. The reality is that the human rights projects are currently facing severe strain. The threat to our human rights require a very firm and unapologetic response from all of us, each and every one of us. The time has come for us to stand up and boldly proclaim our constitutional obligations and the promises that were made to us in the new South Africa in 1994. We at the Human Rights Commission strongly believe that human rights continue to offer the best prospects of maintaining dignity, equality, freedom, and development for all. Human rights are central to our very being, and human rights projects will fail unless we continue meaningfully towards the eradication of inequality and structures that operate to maintain inequality. We see this gross inequality, Mr. President, and we would really like some proactive action from the government to eradicate that inequality. We cannot continue to live under the condition where a minority of people are living in excess wealth and the majority of the people are suffering in abject poverty. On this Human Rights Day, I urge the government to fulfill the promises we made to the people of this country in 1994. We must honor the lives of those lost in exchange for our freedom. At the Human Rights Commission, our object and purpose are to promote, to protect, and to monitor the observance of human rights for all people living in South Africa. The important work of the Human Rights Commission and other such institutions are central and crucial in this respect. This is not in itself sufficient. We call on all people, every one of us. We call on the government, we call on the private sector, churches, political leaders, traditional leaders, and civil society organizations to hold hands and to take forward the baton for liberation. We are a liberated nation, but are we experiencing it? No. Far too much blood was shed for us to live in a democratic society. Importantly, we also call on the government to operationalize Chapter 5 of the Equality Act, which not only require all persons to refrain from violating equality, but also make a legal requirement to actively promote equality. Finally, I pay tribute to our heroes and heroines who selflessly fought for our human rights. And they include Ma Albertina Sisulu, Ma Winnie Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Steve Biko, Walter Sisulu, Solomon Mahlangu, Sophie Williams, Helen Joseph, Lillian Ngoyi, and many, many others whom I unfortunately cannot mention all by name here today. They are the greatest symbol of human rights of our time. Let the lifelong commitment to human rights, dignity, justice, and compassion forever remain an inspiration to us and the world. Let us continue to build a nation of human rights for all, based on human dignity, equality, and freedom. Let this day define our people. Let this day define our country. Let this day define our struggle. And most of all, let this day, as we celebrate today, define the freedom that we so hard fought for. I thank you.